Wow. After rewatching this movie, I feel old. Hello everyone and welcome to Sketch Review, the series where I review movies and shows, but in a hopefully fun, unique, and artistic way. Today, for my first ever sketch review, I'm going to be reviewing the first ever entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a movie that helped change the superhero genre and movies in general forever. Of course, I'm talking about Iron Man. Released on May 2nd of 2008, directed by Jon Favreau, starring Robert Downey Jr., Gwyneth Paltrow, Jeff Bridges, Terrence Howard, Sean Toub, Leslie Bibb, Clark Gregg, Farhan Tahir, Saeed Bedrea, Paul Bettany as the voice of Jarvis, and Jon Favreau as Happy Hogan. So let's jump into the movie that helped revitalize Robert Downey Jr.'s career, the Iron Man character, and in a way, Marvel for mainstream audiences. Billionaire playboy Tony Stark is the CEO of Stark Industries, a technologically advanced company he inherited from his father, which he is using to create innovative weapons for the United States military. Along with his best friend and Air Force Colonel James Rhodey Rhodes, they travel to Afghanistan for Tony to demonstrate Stark Industries' new missile, the Jericho. The movie starts in medias res, and while I do think it takes a little bit longer than it should to get back to the point where the movie begins, it does a good job highlighting the characters' personalities, especially Tony Stark, who is by design not someone who you'd think would be a superhero. It's also weird seeing Terrence Howard as Rhodey, considering Don Cheadle plays the role in everything after this. Not that he's bad, but it is different. After the demonstration, Stark and the military convoy escorting him are attacked by a terrorist group known as the Ten Rings, who use Stark Industries weapons against them, which gravely injures Tony. Tony Stark awakens in a cave alongside Ho Yinsen, a man who created an electromagnetic device planted in Stark's chest to keep the shrapnel from the Stark Industries missile from entering his heart. Raza, the leader of the Ten Rings, tells Stark that in order to leave, he must build them a Jericho missile, but Stark and Yinsen know that Raza will probably kill them regardless. I think changing the Ten Rings to a terrorist organization was a smart move. An evil warlord named the Mandarin with 10 magical rings would not really work well at this time in the franchise. Maybe if this movie came out today, but I think starting with a realistic threat was a smart way to go. Since their chance of survival is slim, Tony secretly gets to work on something else. First, he builds a miniaturized arc reactor, a powerful generator used at Stark Industries, to replace the electromagnet in his chest. This arc reactor will also be used to power an armored suit that Tony will wear to help him and Yinsen escape. After a couple close calls, they activate the Mark I suit and make their escape. However, Yinsen dies in the escape, telling Tony not to waste his life. Scarring Raza's face in an explosion and burning the rest of the Stark Industries weapons and Ten Ring soldiers, Tony flies out of there but crashes in the desert, destroying the suit. He's later rescued by Rhodey and brought back to the United States, where he announces Stark Industries will no longer be in the weapons business, much to the dismay of his father's former partner and company manager, Obadiah Stane. In his garage workshop, Tony begins his work on the Mark II suit and makes an improved arc reactor for his chest, keeping this mostly hidden from his personal assistant Pepper Potts, and the two begin flirting. Tony makes a surprise appearance at a Stark Industries sponsored party, dances with Pepper, and is attempted to be communicated with by Agent Coulson of S.H.I.E.L.D., but learns from Christine Everhart, the journalist he slept with at the beginning of the movie, that Stark Industries has continued to supply weapons, this time to the Ten Rings themselves, have used weapons like the Jericho missile against Golmira, which was Yinsen's home village. Tony confronts Obadiah about this, who reveals to Stark that he was the one who locked him out of the company at a board meeting. You know, if Tony didn't spend all his time working on a new armor alone in his garage, he probably would have known that his company was up to no good. This also begs the question of why he was building that armor anyway. He didn't know that terrorists were still around using his weapons, and he renounced weapon making entirely. I guess his solution to being more accountable and stopping the production of weapons is to build his most powerful weapon yet, and use it with no authority at all. Well, I guess the movie does need to happen. I mean, the logical route would be him overseeing the company's efforts to provide people with things like housing, food, healthcare, but then the movie would be pretty boring, wouldn't it? We want to watch people in metal suits fight each other. Tony dons his most recent suit, the Mark III armor, and flies over to Golmira to deal with the Ten Rings himself. This is the point in the movie where we finally get to see his full armor in all its action, and what an entrance. The very mechanical design gives it a real weight, and at times it feels like there really is someone there in that armor doing things. He takes down the terrorists, destroys the weapons, and flies home, but is attacked by the US Air Force. Tony manages to get them off his back and even saves one of the pilots when the parachute fails, And Rhodey realizes while on a call with Stark while he's doing all this that Tony is the one in that suit. Sometime afterwards, Raza and the Ten Rings have put together the pieces of Tony's broken Mark I armor and meet with Stane to make a deal with him. This does not work out. Stane takes the armor and has the Ten Rings killed. He brings the suit back to Stark Industries to reverse engineer a new powerful suit from those Mark I designs. Because Stane was dealing to the Ten Rings earlier, Tony has Pepper use a flash drive to hack into Stane's computer and find any more information. She finds schematics for Stane's new armor, which is dubbed the Ironmonger if you're a comic fan. Stane quickly realizes that she knows more than she should as he walked into the office and tries to confront her before she leaves the building. However, Agent Coulson was there to meet with her to get into contact with Tony, but she quickly tells him what Stane is up to and that they need to stop him. I feel like a scene or two was missing here. We go from Pepper seeing Tony come back to his house in the Iron Man suit and Stane taking the armor from Raza, and then immediately Pepper is working with Tony to steal from Stane's computer, and Stane's armor is basically done immediately. Because Stane's scientists cannot finish the suit and replicate the miniaturized arc reactor, Stane goes to Stark in person, paralyzes him with this paralyzing device, and takes the arc reactor from his chest. Pepper, Coulson, and other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents go to confront Stane, but he has already equipped the armor and attacks them. With the help of Rhodey, Tony puts in his old arc reactor, suits up in the Mark III armor, and goes to stop Stane himself. You know, Obadiah Stane has this supersonic device that paralyzes and maybe even kills anyone with a close enough proximity. Why exactly does he need a giant super armor? Just amplifies the noise thing and boom, instantly kill all the people you want to. But again, that would be a lot more boring than watching two armored guys beat each other up on a highway. Iron Man and Ironmonger battle through the streets, making their way to the top of the building, housing the large arc reactor at Stark Industries. With both of their suits heavily damaged, Tony tells Pepper to overload the reactor, which unleashes a large energy beam, giant blue space laser that kills Stane. The day after, the public has caught wind of this Iron Man, who Stark Industries and S.H.I.E.L.D. claim to be Tony's bodyguard. However, at a press conference, Tony decides to reveal to the world that he is, in fact, Iron Man. In a post-credits scene, Nick Fury emerges from the shadows of Stark's home, telling him that he's not the only superhero and that he wants to discuss the Avengers initiative. This post-credits scene changes everything. Now there are scenes after credits. Now we know that Iron Man's story isn't over, but more importantly, there are others out there. The idea of a cinematic universe may be common today, but it wasn't back then. Things weren't going to go back to the way they were before. Early on in the MCU's life, they shot their movies on film, and while I'm not here to argue if film or digital is better, this movie does have a certain quality to it that I feel like many modern MCU movies don't have. While modern MCU movies are criticized for having this almost desaturated, concrete gray look to them, this movie doesn't. It does have a lot of depth and is pretty colorful at times. I feel like the design of this suit helped with the effects of this movie. Not only was a lot of the suit practical in different shots in the movie, but the fact that so many nuts and bolts and other, mechanical stuff were exposed on the suit gives it this realistic feel, even if it is a very unrealistic thing. There are a couple shots here and there that look fake, but it is a 2008 movie after all. A lot of it looks really good, and it does hold up very well. The soundtrack didn't really blow me away, but I think the electric guitar and a feeling emulating Black Sabbath's Iron Man song felt in the soundtrack gave it a distinct feel to some other superhero movies. A lot of this movie was ad-libbed, and I think that plays a big part in why people find these characters likable, especially Tony Stark. They were able to express themselves freely within the guidelines of the scene, and it gave their characters a level of realism that always isn't, the case in superhero movies, especially at the time. It's interesting to look back on this movie when thinking about the MCU now and how planned out everything is. A character like Phil Coulson, who appears in, intertwines these earlier movies together, as well as being the main character on the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., was only supposed to have a very small role in this movie. The line at the end, "I am Iron Man," which changed the trajectory of the Iron Man character, was ad-libbed by Robert Downey Jr. Little moments like these, unknowingly at the time, really did help shape the franchise. And a lot rode on this movie to succeed. Marvel had already sold off the rights to so many of their characters. Who's to say what would happen if they weren't be able to be successful on their own with a lesser-known character like Iron Man? If this movie failed, who knows what kind of Marvel Cinematic Universe there would be today. The Marvel Cinematic Universe's first entry is a relatively straightforward one, but that doesn't make it bad at all. Things like Tony Stark's personality, the ad-libbed dialogue, heavy guitar soundtrack, and weight to the action scenes help give this movie some personality. It is really good, it really holds up, and my score for this movie is good. I don't think it's the best superhero movie I've ever seen, but it does a lot of things really well, and I enjoyed it. So that's gonna do it for my first ever sketch review. Hopefully you guys liked it and are looking forward to the future of this series. Next time I'll be reviewing the next installment in the MCU's Phase 1, The Incredible Hulk.